During the 1800s, attitudes to public hangings were dwindling in popularity across all sections of society. As the century progressed, it was seen to be no longer fashionable to attend and be seen at these events. The upper levels of Victorian society and the notions of morality and a populist movement to outlaw these gatherings made people embarrassed to admit they had attended these events, and so numbers slowly dwindled. That is, unless it was a sensational case that, due to the horror of the crime, had grabbed the public attention, and in particular the execution of a Swiss valet by the name of Courvoisier at Newgate Prison on July 6, 1840. The crime? The brutal slaying of a 73-year-old peer of the realm. Around 40,000 people turned up to witness the event, including Charles Dickens and William Makepeace Thackeray. It was a normal start to the morning of the 5th of May at 14 Norfolk Street, now renamed Dunraven Street, in Mayfair, when Lord William Russell rose at 9 o'clock and had his breakfast at the usual time. He was a widower, his wife having died several years earlier. Around midday, he went to the exclusive gentlemen's club Brooks, which was part of his routine, and he would spend most of the day there. Before he left the house, he called his valet, Francois Courvoisier, and gave him a number of jobs to do and several messages to deliver, amongst which was one to the coachman to prepare his carriage and be in readiness to take him home from his club at 5 o'clock. Courvoisier, said to have been confused by the number of tasks he had been given, forgot to inform the coachman, and Russell returned home by hired cab, showing some dissatisfaction at the neglect of his servant. It doesn't appear that he showed a lot of anger, which could well have caused ill feeling between him and his valet regarding what had happened. It was later said that Courvoisier had been heard by his fellow servants to express his dislike to his employer, who he described as testy and dissatisfied, and said that if he had his money, he would return to his native Switzerland. The valet had only been working in the household since March 1840, for just 5 weeks. He had been recruited by Lord Russell after a chance conversation with Lady Julia Lockwood. He had mentioned that his valet, Ellis, was leaving. Lockwood recommended Courvoisier and was assured he was of good character, conduct and competency to fill the position. He was to be paid £45 per year, to be reviewed after 6 months, when, if he had proved suitable, would be raised to £50. Courvoisier was born in the small village of Mont-la-Ville in Switzerland in August 1816, the son of a farmer. He was educated at the local village school, after which he assisted working on the farm, before moving to England in 1836. He had worked as a waiter at the Hotel du Port in Leicester Square, London. With the help of his uncle, who was employed as a butler by an English baronet, he got work as a footman in the household of Lady Lockwood. After 7 months, in March 1837, he moved to the home of John Fector, the Conservative MP for Dover, also as a footman, where he remained for 3 years before being employed by Lord Russell, who also employed a maid called Sarah Manser, the cook Mary Hannell, as well as Courvoisier, who all lived in, plus a coachman and a groom who lived elsewhere. The evening continued in the usual way, with Russell having his dinner at 7 o'clock, after which he went to the drawing room to read. Courvoisier was seen locking doors to the house and checking all the windows were shut. At 10 o'clock, Courvoisier had his dinner with the two female servants, and the women retired to their rooms half an hour later. He remained on duty to attend to Russell until he was ready to go to bed at 12:30. The following morning at 6:30 a.m., the maid, Sarah Manser, found the main rooms of the house in disarray, as if they had been ransacked by thieves. In the drawing room, furniture had been strewn around, contents of drawers scattered all over the floor. The rooms on the lower floors had also been ransacked. She alerted Hannell the cook as well as Courvoisier, to whom she had recounted what she had seen downstairs, and it was agreed they would check on Lord Russell immediately, and they went to his bedroom together. Having knocked on the door and receiving no reply, they entered the room. Courvoisier went to the window to open the curtains, while Manser went to the bedside. As daylight flooded the room, she saw that the pillow was saturated with blood, and his lordship dead, with his throat cut. Manser immediately went for the police and a doctor, and, when they returned, found Courvoisier in what was described a stupefied state, still in Russell's room, sitting on the bed staring at his dead employer. He appeared to regain his senses and suggested Russell's son should be contacted before taking the police downstairs, where he pointed to marks on the pantry door and said it must have been where the house had been broken into. The police now started a detailed search of all the floors of the house, the result of which was a firm conviction in their minds that the murder had been perpetrated by someone who was resident in the house, and that a simulated robbery had been staged. A package was found to contain many articles of his lordship's property, which was odd in itself, as the items were small enough for a thief to put in their pocket. In Russell's bedroom, a cupboard with an ornamental box containing a quantity of gold sovereigns had been opened and emptied. Where the key to the cupboard was kept was known only to Courvoisier and his employer. It was thought that a few hundred of the coins were missing, together with a number of other items of value, including a £10 note that had been in a wallet in the bedroom and a gold pocket watch. These circumstances, not unsurprisingly, induced a strong suspicion against Courvoisier by the police, who detained all three staff and, for 2 days, combed the house for clues. Concealed in various places in the pantry, they found various valuable items belonging to Russell. A gold locket was also found in Courvoisier's possession, and on the 8th of May he was arrested for murder. A police officer searching the lower floor of the house discovered behind the skirting board 5 gold rings, the property of his lordship. In the same place were also found 5 gold coins. Behind another part of the skirting was found a Waterloo medal, which was known to have been in the possession of his lordship, and also found the £10 note, which has been mentioned before. The fact of the discovery of this note was an important feature in the case. If it had been removed from the wallet by an ordinary thief, it undoubtedly would have been carried off by him. Found as it was concealed behind the skirting board of the pantry, it was taken as almost conclusive the guilt of the valet, because no one else could have put it there. From the moment the police arrived, Courvoisier was in their presence the whole time, and could not have had the chance to hide any missing objects. A further search was subsequently made, and a gold ring, on which his lordship had kept his keys, and which had been attached to his watch by a ribbon, was found. and then, on the evening of the next day, a locket was taken from Courvoisier's pocket. Yet more missing items were discovered. On the 11th of May, a chased gold key was found, and on Wednesday the 13th, a part of the pantry sink, which is covered with lead, a portion had been removed in the course of the investigation, and it occurred to the police officer that there was something out of place with the appearance of the lead. The officer turned it up, and there he found the missing gold pocket watch belonging to Russell. While the rest of the staff were released, Courvoisier was formally charged. The trial began at the Old Bailey and took 3 days. It was widely reported in the London newspapers and attracted many titled spectators and other notable figures. The defence benefited from the generosity of Sir George Beaumont, a long-time employer of Courvoisier's uncle, who donated £50 for the employment of a solicitor and a barrister, while the prosecution was led by John Adolphus. Courvoisier pleaded not guilty when the indictment was read out in court, as he was certain he would escape conviction. During the course of the inquiries, which had been made subsequent to the murder, some pieces of silverware that included Lord Russell's distinctive silver knives and forks were found to have been removed from the house of his lordship. After the search of the house took place, there was good reason to believe that this theft had occurred long before the murder had taken place. All the efforts of the police to recover this stolen property had proved ineffectual. Although large rewards had been offered for its recovery, it was not until the evening of the first day's trial that it was brought forward. A message with the information was sent to the court that the items were in the possession of Madame Poulaire, the manager of the Hotel du Port in Leicester Square, where Courvoisier had previously worked. It was confirmed by the police that the pieces had come from Russell's house. The circumstances of this most extraordinary discovery was directly notified to the prisoner's solicitor, and when Courvoisier was asked as to the truth of the allegations made, he admitted his guilt of the theft at once. The defence barrister began his cross-examination of witnesses, including Hannell and Manser, telling the court that it appeared that Courvoisier had no apparent motive to murder Russell, and that the evidence against him was circumstantial. But he also suggested the accused, as a foreigner, may behave differently to an Englishman. That night, a new witness, Madame Charlotte Poulaire, came forward to the police and, during cross-examination the following day, she testified that Courvoisier had left a parcel containing the silverware with her prior to the murder and, when it was opened by the police, it was found to contain items belonging to Russell. It was later reported that after Madame Poulaire's evidence, Courvoisier summoned his defence counsel and said, "I have committed a murder," but added that he did not want to change his plea. The barrister, addressing the court on the third day, continued to argue that the evidence against his client was circumstantial. At this stage of the proceedings, it was felt that such a confession had placed the defence in a difficult position. For them to have thrown up their briefs would have been at once to admit the uselessness of any efforts to save their client from an ignominious death, and they decided that they should continue their defence of the prisoner. They were trying to implicate the female servants of his lordship as partners in crime for the murder of Lord Russell, and in a conspiracy to secure the conviction and execution of the valet. Although the allegation was withdrawn, a considerable degree of abuse was heaped upon the police by Mr. Phillips in his speech for the defence of the prisoner, because of some improper conduct of which, he alleged, they had been guilty, tending to prejudice his case and even going to the lengths of fabricating evidence to excite suspicion in the minds of the jury against him, and contended that the evidence against the accused was suspicion only. The judge, having summed up the case, left it to the jury to decide, and they returned a verdict of guilty. As a consequence, Judge Tyndall passed a sentence of death by hanging, to take place on the 6th of July 1840. The day after the sentence was passed, Courvoisier made this confession. His lordship was very cross with me, and told me I must quit his service. As I was coming upstairs from the kitchen, I thought it was all up with me. My character was gone, and I thought it was the only way I could cover my faults by murdering him. This was the first moment of any idea of the sort entering my head. I went into the dining room and took a knife from the sideboard. I do not remember whether it was a carving knife or not. I then went upstairs. I opened his bedroom door and heard him snoring in his sleep. There was a rushlight in his room burning at the time. I went near the bed by the side of the window, and then I murdered him. He just moved his arm a little. He never spoke a word. Courvoisier's confession was accompanied by religious fervour, and he spent his final days at Newgate Prison in prayer. His last appearance, the day before his death, was at a service in the prison chapel, where he stood before his own coffin, watched by the many spectators who had applied to attend. Returned to his cell, he was visited by the Swiss consul, who gave him a letter from his mother, in which she wrote that she forgave him, and he was permitted to write a short reply. On execution day, the usual protocols were followed, with the scaffold erected outside the debtor's door of the prison, ready for the execution time of 8 a.m. At the appointed time, William Calcraft, the executioner, led Courvoisier to the scaffold, and a noose placed around his neck, and a hood over his eyes, and he was hung. A crowd estimated at 40,000 people witnessed the execution, including British aristocrats, members of Parliament, and other notables. Research by historians over the years, including a police officer's diary, suggests that Courvoisier was suspected for 3 other murders during a 3-year killing spree. 21-year-old barmaid Eliza Davies, whose body was found early on the morning of the 9th of May 1837, on the landing outside her bedroom with her throat cut in the King's Arms pub, having been seen with a man with a foreign accent the night before. On the 27th of May the following year, prostitute Eliza Grimwood was found dead, having brought a client home from the theatre the previous evening, with her throat cut and her abdomen viciously slashed open. Her death was initially blamed on her jealous boyfriend, bricklayer William Hubbard, who discovered the body, but there was no real evidence to connect him to the crime. Then there was watchmaker Robert Westwood, whose dead body was discovered at his home on the 3rd of June 1839, after smoke was seen coming from his house in Soho, which drew the attention of the police. His throat had been cut and his clothes set on fire. Although suspected, Courvoisier was never charged with any of these murders. Whilst in Newgate Prison, he had said he had killed 2 women, thought to be Davies and Grimwood, but he then later withdrew this claim.